Welcome, everybody. This is the SharePoint Dev Weekly episode 9. This time around, Vesa isn't here. He's enjoying some family time off, well-deserved. Still, I am not alone by myself. Together with me is no one else than Chris O'Brien. Welcome,
Hello.
Chris.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, busy as usual, but I think that goes for all of us in this world, I think.
Absolutely. So, for those who don't know who you are, how about you say a few words, who you are, where you work, what you do?
Sure. So I head up the development team at a UK partner called Content and Code, and we do a lot of work around Office 365, lots of different angles of that, whether it's development projects on SharePoint or identity and cloud app security stuff on sort of the more platform side of things. There's a variety of teams here that are all strong, and I lead the dev team, which is around 10 guys. We generally focus on Office 365. We have the occasional on-premises SharePoint project, but yeah, it's a real mix of things.
Yeah, and you're also an MVP, right?
Yes, 11 years now.
11 years. Well, yeah. So you've been around for quite some time. I recall, if I recall correctly, haven't we met in Seattle at the last MVP summit that was in Seattle?
Yes, we were both there at the last one, and I guess the first time we met would have been, 2007 maybe, something like that?
Well, yeah, I think, around that time. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, time goes by, and I guess we both had families and so on, but, you know.
Absolutely. And I guess that back then, we both were quite a lot invested in WCM, right?
That's right.
On SharePoint.
That's certainly where I came from. And even before SharePoint, I started out with Content Management Server, and I came from that track, if you like. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's still and it's still weird to imagine that some of the pieces that we used to work with in the past are technically still they're in product.
Definitely,
right? Even now it runs in the cloud, right?
Yeah. You can go looking and still see bits of the mere technologies and VTI bin and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. So, any updates from the last week? Anything you've worked with? Anything in particular?
The last week. Okay, so work things. I'm busy with sort of our digital workplace strategy and working out, how we meet our clients' needs. That, are trying to do things that probably moving beyond intranet and bringing together bits of Office 365. So, everybody's interested in things that show teams that I'm a member of, my tasks in Planner, as well as usual things like my files, my documents, my sites, my contacts, and so on. So we're doing more in Teams development and so on. I'm also planning 2 very large SharePoint Dev projects, one for a legal company and one for a big sort of tax and consultancy company. So people are still building things in SharePoint, it seems. We put out an Outlook add-in in one of our clients that's being used by 50,000 users.
Cool.
And that's going well. So, and then Power Apps and Flow stuff in other clients. So yeah, real mix of things.
Nice. Cool. The other day, if I think about the things that I've done, there are actually a few of them. So we have new release of the CLI, the cross-platform CLI that allows you to manage 365 and SPFX. We've added a few commands there. And then another thing is, and we will also get back to that during our weekly announcement, is that CLI is becoming a part of something else that is being built. So that is also really cool. So with that, I think it's a good moment to have a look at the latest announcements in the community. Cool. Let me share my screen. I have a few links aligned, and I am curious about your opinion on a few of them. All right, so first, the first thing that took my attention was a tweet by Juha Koivula, who is one of the Valo guys, and he says that basically when they love SPFX for the fact that I can build it once and it works both on-prem and online and classic and modern. It's like I think that's one of the value props that you have around SPFX, right?
That's right. It's kind of interesting when you think about SPFX and where it came from. I guess there was a little bit of resistance even from developers initially because it was it's another new dev model thing. But,
oh, right. Yeah, we know that.
Yeah, that old chestnut. But anybody that said that, I guess, has been proven wrong because the model's so successful now.
So in the things that you guys do you do a lot of non-SPFX works, or are you already all over to SPFX and you do only that no matter where the client is in modern or still in classic?
If it's SharePoint, then now it's generally SPFX, yeah. And so, that's great because we enjoy building on the platform, we enjoy what's in the framework and how to connect to things and so on. But obviously the big thing that we're really happy about is SPFX Webparts running in Teams soon.
Oh, right. That was one of the announcements during Ignite, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
And I guess there were some indications about it before then, but that's great for us, and I think great for many SharePoint developers because all those skills that you've been busy building over the past year or two now transfer to Teams, and that becomes a great canvas for line of business applications.
Yeah, and also it requires you, I reckon, to some point to cut through all of the services that you have available in 365 and not think only about your intranet being basically files and sites, but go beyond it, right? Also embracing things like Teams, Project, basically all services that you have in the cloud, right?
That's right, yeah. And, I think anybody that's doing an intranet these days that is really just around communications and news and content pages, they're really missing out, I think, on what's possible in Office 365.
Yeah.
I guess on this, the thing that I'm really interested to see what happens in the next 2 or 3 years is, as SharePoint and Teams become more prevalent in their use, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the real world about whether Teams really does become this single pane of glass.
I get your point. Right. So, in other words, what do you open when you want to go to your intranet? Will it be the browser or Teams?
Yeah, and certainly for the solutions we build, we're making it so that it's possible to use either to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But, there are sort of still trade-offs and things that are more suited to one client rather than the other. So I'm really interested to see how the industry goes in the next 2 or 3 years and whether it really will have a massive shift towards Teams or whether there'll be a mix depending on the organization and the culture. So
Cool. Yeah. And related to that a little bit, the other week, Valo guys, together with Joanne Klein, released an ebook that explains how you can benefit of the modern architecture of a site, meaning more towards like hubs, introduce the notion of more flat architecture of your site, comparing to in the past we had sub-sites, subwebs, and all that. So what approach do you guys use? Do you tend to use more already make use of hubs and more of the flat hierarchy, or are you still seeing a lot of customers who still tend to think in the hierarchical model with webs?
We've got some clients out there that have intranets where they've done quite a lot with subsites and they do have those hierarchies. I guess for solutions that we've built in recent times, then they generally all have followed the flat structure. And this was the case even before hub sites and so on. I guess we have some components that we commonly use that stitch the experience together and make it into a nice user experience so that, I can find the sites in this flat structure and, maybe I've got some kind of logical structure and navigation on top of it.
And do you guys have to deal often with the case? I think that was one of the value props for hubs is that when in the past you would build a hierarchy and then you have to move one site from one place to another, then you would have all the things like broken links, documents not being there, people not being able to find where things are anymore. Whereas with the hub sites, well, it's just flat, so you just hang it from one place to another, but the URL is the same, everything still works. So do you guys see a lot of use for that too, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the way that our solutions have sort of sidestepped that problem around moving things around is that it's always been the logical structure that's built on tagging and metadata. So It's always been easy for us to, restructure things, and inevitably companies change how they want to express their information. Maybe it's a reorg or something else. And I think for years now, we've always built intranets that are okay with that and align with those principles. But hub sites are a great innovation, and I think they bring some nice things, some nice common requirements like navigation and some of the news roll up and event roll up, and we've got some nice things in there now.
Cool. Cool. All right. Another thing that we have here is another summary post from David, who does that every single time PNP puts something out. He basically does a summary with images, and he does it like every single time is within minutes. Like the recording is done, and within minutes there is summary with all the key messages, key slides of it. Basically making it, if you're on the road or you're busy and you couldn't join the call, it's a really great way to get through the latest announcements and stay up to date.
Yeah, I reference those. He does a great job, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like every single time. So it's like something you can depend on, that every single time there is something out, it will be there.
Yeah,
cool.
You guys need to get him on the payroll.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the guys who go, or the one who goes about the payroll isn't here, right? So it's like an easy way to bail out on it.
Yeah, you got out of that one.
Cool. Another announcement that we have here is from Tony Phillips, who writes about how to create a Microsoft Graph SharePoint Webpart to show recent OneDrive files. And he just goes through the step-by-step process of how he would create a Webpart connect to Graph. And from the looks of it, it's still on version 1.4.1, which is the old one. And if you would start from 1.6.0, that is a version where connection to the Microsoft Graph is in GA, meaning that's the officially supported way. There is a bunch of bugs that were available or were present in the past and now are fixed. So if you work with SPFX and you do anything with the Microsoft Graph or even AAD in general, we recommend that you update to at least 1.6.0, because that's basically the baseline for everything along these abilities. Do you guys use a lot of Azure AAD APIs or MS Graph? Because I know I follow the things that you write and share a lot, and it's like you are big on functions.
Yeah, exactly. And we just seem to find in my team that we're using functions a lot, and generally it's for connecting to the graph or maybe connecting to some bespoke system. But we seem to be plugging them into all sorts of different things, whether it's SPFX or whether it's Power Apps or Flow or maybe site designs and site provisioning. So yeah, it's a very common building block for us. But yeah, those key technologies of SPFX, the graph, Azure Functions, they're basically what we're doing all the time.
And I reckon that when you build a function, you don't expose it anonymously, right?
No, we don't. So it is AAD auth. Yes, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess that this part is like just like right on time things you guys actually needed in order to do your job, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's great that everything is baked into SPFX now and things aren't in beta anymore. And, we can just do those easy connections rather than having to go off and, use ADAL or something to get a token ourselves. Things are much nicer for a SharePoint dev these days, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Another announcement that we have, a post, is from Nandeep Nachan. And it's about deploying your SPFX webparts to library. Right, so when you build a web part or an extension, there are a number of ways in which or a number of locations to which you can deploy it. You can deploy it to library, CDN, or to some other location like Azure Blob. Right, and this article goes about the case when you would want to deploy it to library. Chris, which location do you guys choose?
For most of our deployments, it's basically into a library, but with Office 365 public CDN. Okay,
and the customers with whom you work, they don't mind that it's publicly available, assuming you know URL. Then there is no IP in there that they wouldn't want to make available to everybody.
Yeah, that's right, and it's a conversation we have with all of our clients, and I can think of one actually where. In their case, the file does stay within the library, which I guess is what this article is talking about, and we don't enable the public CDN for this kind of content. For most of our other clients, though, it's the Office 365 public CDN, and that does the work of doing the CDN optimization, and they're happy and okay with the fact that it's available publicly. When you look at SPFX bundle files, they're not necessarily the easiest to read as a human, so.
Yeah, and I guess so. There are two sides of it, right? Because one is the bundle, which basically means that there are ways to some degree reverse engineer the code.
Mm-hmm.
And even without it, you would be able to run it in your own tenant. And imagine that I would build a web part that shows stocks, then you would be able to reuse that in your own environment because that's just a public API, right?
Yeah.
So unless there are some specific things like in properties, you would have to specify the API key. Without it, you cannot use that. But I mean, other than that, you would be able to benefit all of that. But another thing that I wonder about specifically for this case is that if you look at how assets are being served from SPO, there isn't really like things like, for example, the long expiry time. Or I think that by default it's not even HTTP2. And there are some other things as well for which you might say that if you really want to optimize it for performance, you should go at least with the CDN, but maybe with something else that you control yourself, right? Because if you build a web part, why should the user download it every day again? It's not like the web part will change every day, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. The public CDN is super convenient and very easy for developers to use, but it's not necessarily the optimum solution for hosting those files, is it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, correct.
And you're absolutely right as well that there's a whole host of, I kind of call these like the modern day security considerations for SharePoint and Office 365 and customizations. And, I think as we've transitioned to this new world, there's probably a whole class of tenant administrators and people out there that don't necessarily have the understanding of these mechanisms to identify the risks. Right.
Absolutely. Cool. Another one is tweet by Stefan Bauer, and that actually ties into the thing that I mentioned first, is about CLI being a part of something else that we built at PNP. So there is the notion of the PNP community SPFX generator, which you could say extend the generator that we have available out of the box, right? So out of the box, you can create a new project that uses Knockout, React, or Node library at all. And the community one extend that with support for, if I recall correctly, Vue and now Angular elements. So that's either available or coming. And now the other thing that it does is that if you would run it, so it's currently based on SharePoint Framework 1.6. And imagine that you would run it to add something to project that you already have, and the project was built on SPFX 1.5. So we already have in CLI the notion of the ability to upgrade the project from one version to another. Now the same thing is available here. So if you run generator to add something new to a project you've already have that you've built in the past, generator will warn you to say, like, upgrade it at first because I depend on new things that are not available to you. And you can then streamline that directly from that experience. You don't need to have to go to some other tool to run something else.
That's nice, yeah, because I think as the new releases of SPFX come out, I think it's really common for you to go back to some existing code and you find that you're now at a new version of SPFX, so you have to decide whether to do the upgrade at this point. I think it's really nice if it's built into the generator.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, good work.
Yeah. And then another one we have is another blog post from Corey Roth about fixing horizontal scrolling in your details list using scrollable pane and sticky. So this is like a really edge case. If you have too much info to show on a page, both in height and width, you can build stuff with Office UI Fabric React. But the thing is, there's a quirk where you have too many, when you have too many rows to fit in your container, you want to be able to scroll that with the header being fixed. But and if the columns don't fit in width, how do you reach them? Right, because the header is fixed, so you cannot scroll on that. So right. Corey gives tips like how to work around it using the things available for us. And then finally, the last one is a kind of gem. So, and that's from Sergey Sergeyev. I work a lot with REST in SharePoint. And the one thing that you do is the docs aren't really that great. There's a lot of room for improvement. So what I tend to do a lot is that I would go to $API/$metadata to get the latest list of what is available in REST. And he does exactly the same, only he built a UI around it. So in here, imagine that you want to see things related to hub size. You would say hub, it filters down, and then for each one you can click, and you can see the methods, the call, official docs, if any. So we can explore all the methods, payloads, what's available, what is supposed to be passed. So kind of an easier way to go through the really huge XML that you would get otherwise in browser.
That is nice. I mean, that REST API has always been fairly easy to work for simple operations and gets, but as soon as you need to do posts and you need to pass some complex data structure and it's kind of different in every particular part of the API, tools like this are really helpful.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I guess that with that, we went through our announcements. The one thing that we've asked our guests on the show over the last few weeks is, what is your number one favorite announcement from Ignite?
Okay.
I know I am putting you on a spot because there were like tons of things announced, but just if you could pick only one.
All right. If I could pick only one, it would be the SharePoint and Teams integration.
Okay.
So the ability to run an SPFX web part in Teams tabs, and now that we've got that whole power as that of the canvas, and also that flip integration of basically being able to have Teams solutions that are basically hosted in SharePoint and running from there. So I think this is really powerful. I'm really looking forward to making more use of this.
Yeah,
if I had to throw in some others, I would say obviously some of the stuff around modern SharePoint is cool. It's great to see that that's now becoming a platform where there are fewer gaps and very fewer reasons to build an intranet that isn't on modern SharePoint now. So page designs, some of the things around page approvals, the mega menu, header and footer control, the different types of page header and all the options there that are coming. Those are really good. Microsoft Search I was very excited about. Finally, some kind of unified search across all of Office 365, including Yammer and Teams. I think that's
because it's like the last thing you want to do as a user to have to think, okay, I've seen that. Was it in Yammer? Was it in Teams? Was it in SharePoint? Where in SharePoint? In OneDrive? Maybe. And it's like you start thinking about it and not like being able to do your work, like finding the things you need to have for your job, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, we need to get away from knowledge workers spending so much time finding things. I mean, we've been talking about that for 10 years and it's great that we've now got some kind of unified search. I guess other things as well, devs, some nice things there, improved experience for AAD app registrations that, has been talked around for a long time. All the things in Graph that are now in GA rather than preview. Some great set of enhancements, I think.
And if you recall anything off the top of your head, what are you looking for the most for the next release of SPFX?
So obviously the dynamic data, that'll be good. And it'd be good to have that in there, and the support and the demos of it look great so far. We were talking the other day in the office about the sort of isolated web part approach.
Oh, right,
of being able to do something iframe-like, which is giving me something secure in the page, because that's obviously a topic that you and I have spoken about in the past, when you've got some component on the page that's dealing with sensitive data, and the fact that right now, if you don't do anything in particular, then everything else on the page can access that data as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to those things.
Yeah, and I guess it's not even only on a page, right? Because if you think about the APIs, if you expose them, then suddenly every piece of script across your whole intranet can access these APIs, right? And that can be your LOB, that can be your email, whatever you like.
Yes. And that is a classic example, isn't it, of almost like the new kind of threat that lots of administrators aren't really fully on top of. And, it's a whole new world, really, in terms of where the threats are coming from in an Office 365 landscape.
Absolutely. Because, we've been used to doing that in the past a lot. Like, give the users the ability to extend their environment to their needs, and they will just grab a widget from internet, drop it on a page, it works, game on. And then they don't realize, like, okay, but you've just added a third-party unvetted script to the same environment where you store your HR information, personnel information, confidential projects, and if CEO is the person who comes to that page, and he or she can do anything across the internet, well, you might have an issue.
Absolutely. That reminds me, just recently I did a solution review and a code review from an organization that came to us. They'd had an intranet built in Office 365 by somebody else. And I was amazed to find some of the techniques used. Like they were basically looking up sensitive data from Box.com and a HR system called Solaris. And in all cases, what was happening is it was being routed through an anonymous third-party service on the internet that was basically just a developer convenience that you might use in dev. And we talk about sort of whether something should be on the client side or the server side, where it's sort of secure and can't be sniffed and so on. Mm-hmm. So they had all of their sensitive data not going through some secure server-side component like an Azure function, but everything was instead being routed through this free, anonymous third-party service on the internet that helped with calls. Yeah. And, I just couldn't believe the kind of data that was going through there.
But I mean, that's the way people think, right? I mean, and then on the other hand, like companies think about things like VPN, RSA tokens, and try to lock everything down, and then they use that.
That's right. So it led to some very interesting conversations when I issued my report and told them.
I can imagine that. All right, cool. I guess that was it. Thank you again for being on the show. And we'll have another episode next week. Thank you.
Good to talk to you, mate. Bye.
Bye.